Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. Trade controls on Japan in effect. South Korea says its curbs on goods going to and coming from Japan were strengthened at the stroke of midnight. We have the details on the latest shots fired in the Seoul-Tokyo trade spat. African swine fever in South Korea. There are now 2 confirmed cases. The highly contagious disease that affects pigs has locked down the movement of animals nationwide. The culling of thousands of pigs is already beginning. Plus, US President Donald Trump says he won't meet Iran's leader at the upcoming UN General Assembly. As tensions simmer between the two sides, Trump's second-in-command warns Iran not to underestimate Washington's resolve. So we start with the latest salvo in the increasingly bitter trade spat between South Korea and Japan. South Korea's revised export and import measures for strategic materials to and from Japan are now into effect. They came into effect around 10 hours ago. Seoul says the changes are not in retaliation to Japan's export curbs on South Korea, but are merely steps to improve its export management systems. Our Hong Yu starts us off.
South Korea's Trade Ministry has revised its export and import measures for strategic materials to better control exports to countries that violate global export control systems. The most prominent change in the recent revision is the classification change of export partners into Group A1, Group A2, and Group B. Japan, for instance, has been placed in Group A2, meaning that it will face tighter export controls like those in Group B. This means that local companies shipping strategic materials to Japan or other countries listed in Group A2 will have to submit 5 different documents instead of 3 for individual items. The approval process that used to take 5 days will now take 15 days, in addition to a separate approval regarding every export. The revised measures can, however, affect around 100 local companies. To minimize the impact, the South Korean government promised to ensure transparent monitoring of exports and provide customized counseling for affected companies. Another concern is that adopting such export curbs could backfire on Seoul, especially when it filed a complaint against Tokyo's trade restrictions to the World Trade Organization. But the ministry's Director General for International Trade Policy, Lee Ho-hyun, says there is nothing to worry about.
Our revision was based on evaluations of export control systems that go against international export control agreements. But Tokyo's export curbs were politically motivated. We have enough evidence to prove that.
So far, Japan hasn't made any requests for talks, but the South Korean government emphasized that even after the revision of export and import measures for strategic materials, they're ready for talks with Japan to resolve the trade dispute between the two countries. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Now to the other big story of the day. Pigs at a second farm in South Korea were confirmed on Wednesday morning to have African swine fever. The farm in Yeoncheon County is around 50 kilometers from Paju, which is where the first case was confirmed the previous day. The Agriculture Ministry announced Tuesday morning a 48-hour nationwide lockdown on all pig farms. Pigs that were transported from the farm that saw the first case were also blocked from reaching the market and will all be culled by the end of today. Nearly 5,000 other pigs have also been slaughtered to try and prevent the disease spreading. Over the coming hours, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon will visit breeding farms and disinfection facilities in Pocheon, near the inter-Korean border and the affected area, to ensure the thorough management of the situation. Now, the mortality rate for African swine fever in pigs can be as high as 100%. And at the current time, there is no way to prevent it, no way to treat it. But considering the technology and expertise they have, why can't researchers figure out a way to make a vaccine to stop the highly contagious animal disease? Eason J reports.
African swine fever, now confirmed to be in South Korea despite the best efforts of local authorities, causes hemorrhagic fever and kills almost every pig that contracts it. There have been cases of pigs dying as quickly as 1 week after becoming infected, but despite the devastating nature of the disease, there is no known treatment or vaccine on the market. But given the technology available to modern science, why is that the case? While experts say compared to other viruses, the African swine fever virus is large in structure. Viruses like the ASF contain several genotypes, which means there are numerous types of proteins that the virus can produce in the animal's body. These proteins act as a defensive shield for the virus, which makes it extremely complex to fight.
ASF doesn't mutate often, however, because the DNA structure of the virus is so complex, it produces a variety of antigens. It is difficult for the animal's immunity systems to fight back.
Compared to the foot and mouth disease, which can produce more than 10 types of proteins, African swine fever can produce more than 200. Also, aside from the recent outbreaks in Europe and in China, the virus mainly affected the African continent in the past, which could explain why well-funded research institutes in the West and Asia have focused their efforts elsewhere. Currently, work on a vaccine is being expedited in the US, China, and Europe, but experts warn that even if a vaccine can be formulated, it will take some time for it to be approved and go into mass production. Researchers also caution that because African swine fever is capable of destroying immune cells, any vaccine that could be developed might not be 100% effective. 이승재, Arirang News.
Saudi Arabia's oil output is reportedly expected to return to normal levels within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that is much quicker than initially thought, especially in the immediate aftermath of last weekend's drone attacks. Due to the revised outlook, global oil prices seem to be stabilizing following an enormous double-digit plunge on Monday. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
Global oil prices, which has spiked following last weekend's drone attacks on two of Saudi Arabia's key oil facilities, seem to be stabilizing at a faster pace than originally projected. Oil prices dropped over 5% on Tuesday after Saudi Arabia's energy minister said the kingdom has successfully restored its oil production. As of Tuesday morning, West Texas Intermediate crude was trading at just under $60 a barrel, down 5% from the previous day. Brent crude also dropped by over 5%, trading at around $65 a barrel. Oil prices soared nearly 15% on Monday in response to the attacks. Citing Saudi government sources, Reuters reports the country's oil output is expected to be back to normal within the next 2 to 3 weeks. This comes as U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said on Tuesday that Washington is reviewing evidence that suggests Iran was behind the attacks and the U.S. is ready to defend its allies in the Middle East. Speaking at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, he stressed that President Trump will determine the best course of action in the coming days. This comes after Trump hinted Sunday on possible military action, saying the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded. Pence also revealed that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo left for Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to discuss countermeasures to the attacks. On a related note, a senior U.S. official told CBS News on Tuesday that the drones were launched from southern Iran at the northern end of the Persian Gulf. The official said the exact location had been identified, from which some 20 drones and cruise missiles were launched against Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, US President Donald Trump says he will not be sitting down with the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani during next week's UN General Assembly in New York. According to Reuters, Trump told reporters on Tuesday that he believes Iran is not yet ready for talks with the US, but will be. The US leader added that while he never rules anything out, he prefers not to meet Rouhani at this time. Trump's remarks come amid heightened tensions between the two sides over Washington's accusation that Tehran was behind the drone attacks on Saudi Arabian oil facilities. Now, it was exactly a year ago to this day. President Moon Jae-in travelled to North Korea's capital for his third summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. They agreed in Pyongyang to take some really ambitious steps towards denuclearizing the peninsula and advancing into Korean relations. But unfortunately, now we know that those efforts have been gradually running out of steam over the past 12 months. Our Park Hee-jun with this report.
Exactly a year ago on September 19th, the historic day when President Moon Jae-in traveled to the North's capital of Pyongyang for his third summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
나는 오늘 이 자리에서 지난 70년 적대를 완전히 청산하고 다시 하나가 되기 위한 평화의 큰 걸음을 내딛자고 제안합니다.
They made significant agreements that they jointly declared to the rest of the world. And denuclearization was discussed as an official agenda at an inter-Korean summit for the very first time. It produced some concrete measures, with the North agreeing to permanently dismantle its nuclear facilities at the Yongbyon nuclear complex.
We have agreed to make the Korean peninsula a land of peace, free from nuclear threats.
But 1 year later, the Yongbyon complex remains as it is. No roadmaps or timetables for nuclear disarmament have been made. No sanctions have been eased either. Instead, there's North Korea's blunt criticism toward the South and its series of short-range missile tests. At the core of the stalemate is the no-deal summit between North Korea and the U.S. in Hanoi in February. U.S. President Donald Trump walked away after Kim refused to abandon all of Pyongyang's nuclear programs. They also disagreed on the scope of the lifting of sanctions. The long stalemate has been a challenge for President Moon.
What Moon administration can do at the moment is quite limited by the fact that North Korea has publicly came out saying that South Korea should stay out of the negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang. South Korea, by staying out of the negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang, it actually gives some political leverage, meaning that if ultimately the talks breaks down, then South Korea can actually have a chance to restart the talks from a different angle, because it's not politically involved at the moment.
Patience and consistency. Despite the challenges, President Moon chooses to stay committed to his efforts to achieve peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula.
우리 정부는 그 역할이 무엇이든 할 수 있는 모든 것을 다해 한반도 평화 정착과 평화 경제로 공동 번영의 미래를 당당하게 열어갈 것입니다.
North Korea remains willing to negotiate. This is shown by Kim turning up for a last-minute trilateral meeting at Panmunjom and the numerous letters exchanged with President Trump. The Blue House is cautiously observing these recent developments, anticipating a new phase in Pyongyang-Washington talks that hopefully leads to improved inter-Korean relations. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, one of the biggest challenges for militaries around the world, including here in South Korea, is figuring out ways to train soldiers that have yet to experience real life-or-death combat situations. It'll never truly be a substitute for the acute stresses of an actual war. But South Korea is making training as realistic as it possibly can through the incorporation of modern technology. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Instead of live ammunition, trainees at the Army's Korea Combat Training Center in Inje County in Gangwon Province use lasers and sensors. Soldiers wear special gear equipped with a multiple integrated laser engagement system that are then used to simulate situations, including the mobilization of South Korea's army units when the country is under attack. The training is aimed at better preparing the army for real combat, something the South Korean military lacks now that it has been engaged in a full-scale war for some 70 years. The simulations are heavily monitored in a control room where instructors are able to watch real-time combat situations unfold, thanks to a sensor attached to each soldier's uniform. Sensors are attached to detect when soldiers are hit, and depending on the severity of the attack, they could be categorized as mild to critically wounded. Trainings are monitored in real time, and then the unit's performance is analyzed in detail for future evaluation. With the dawn of the 5G era, South Korea military hopes to further develop the training that incorporates big data as well as technologies involving virtual and augmented reality. As part of efforts to boost the modernization of the country's military, South Korea's Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do paid a visit to the center and was reassured that the weapons used during the simulations are the same kind to the ones actually used in combat. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Inje County.
Polls have closed in Israel after Tuesday's election that's widely being seen as a referendum on the country's controversial Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Exit polls show the race between Netanyahu and his main rival Benny Gantz is too close to call. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Dami. So Dami, tell us more.
Mark, exit polls following Israel's second general election in just 5 months suggest we may have to wait some time before we know if Netanyahu can again hang on to power. The century's blue and white alliance of former military chief Benny Gantz is projected to win between 32 and 34 seats, and Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party 31 to 33 seats. Netanyahu is seeking a record 5th term in office, competing against his roughest rival Yetz Gantz, leader of the century's blue and white party. The exit polls showed neither Netanyahu nor Gantz will be able to form a governing coalition without the support of the former defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman. In fact, based on exit polls, Netanyahu has failed to secure a majority, but nothing is confirmed yet. Netanyahu called the snap vote after failing in his efforts to form a governing coalition in the wake of the previous election in April. The preliminary results are due on Wednesday morning, local time. Just a week after a peace agreement with the Taliban was declared dead, 2 suicide bombings rocketed Afghanistan on Tuesday, killing at least 48 people. The first attack left 26 dead as a bomber rammed his explosive-packed motorcycle into a campaign rally being held by President Ashraf Ghani in Parwan province. The president was nearby at the time of the blast, but was unharmed. On the same day, another attack near the U.S. Embassy in Kabul killed 22. The Taliban claimed responsibility for both attacks after vying to disrupt national elections set for September 28th. A spokesman for the Taliban said the first attack targeted presidential guards who were protecting Ghani. The New York Federal Reserve has bought around $53 billion in treasuries and other securities after the benchmark Fed funds rate moved outside its target range. According to reports, the NY Fed successfully launched the so-called overnight repo operation on Tuesday as part of efforts to ease pressure on markets caused by skyrocketing borrowing rates. On Monday, the effective Fed funds rate, a benchmark that influences borrowing costs, stood at 2.25%, up from 2.14% last week. The NY Fed also said it was prepared to pump as much as $75 billion into broader markets in order to hold the Fed's key rate inside its target range of 2 to 2.25%. The rescue operation is the first by the NY Fed in over 10 years.
Now it's time for our Life and Info segment, where we take a look at some useful information for your daily life. And we're going to start with a new program that many people hope will be a great success. Seoul is running a car-free week. Through this Sunday, the South Korean capital hopes to reduce air pollution from cars, cut greenhouse gas emissions, and encourage more people to use public transportation. Designating Sunday as Seoul Car-Free Day, the city will block off Sejongdaero Street from Gwanghwamun to Seoul Plaza and hold an eco-friendly event there as well. Starting in the late 90s in Europe, now some 2,000 cities in 47 countries hold their own car-free days. Now we're going to talk about unique cafe trends here in South Korea. For that, I'm glad to say we have our Yoon Jong-min in the studio joining us this morning. Wonderful to have you with us. So normally when we think of run-of-the-mill coffee shops, we think of just regular cafes, but in Seoul and other cities around South Korea, there are a lot of unique trends going on.
Well, yes, Mark. Well, as more people in South Korea drink more and more coffee, well, not just the menus, but the cafes themselves are changing too. So people don't go to cafes for just Americano or a latte, but rather to take a rest, read, or even enjoy artwork while having a beverage.
Yeah.
So responding to these demands, coffee shops are changing into places with various concepts. For example, there are these botanical garden cafes. A coffee shop in downtown Seoul displays a variety of plants at the shop to provide a more pleasant environment for their customers. People can relax while enjoying the fresh air.
Here I see more green plants than other shops, and it's spacious and quiet. I often visit here because I can feel fresh air thanks to the plants.
The customer can also buy plants at the coffee shop. These days, more people don't just consume products but want a better service. That's why many shops care more about interior design. They say it's equally important to provide quality products and leave a good impression on customers. And cafes are becoming a nice place for emotional healing in the busy city.
Well, it's easy to see why demand is rising so much for these new types of cafes here in Seoul. You might pay a bit more for a cup of coffee, but it's worth it to be in nicer surroundings. You mentioned there were a number of unique trends going on here in South Korea in regards to cafe culture. So what else do you have for us?
So now I want to talk a little bit about gallery cafes. So people visit these coffee shops when they want to enjoy artworks and talk about them with others. So as you can see in the video there, paintings are lined up alongside a corridor. You might wonder whether this place is an art gallery, but in fact, it's a coffee shop. Customers say they like the idea that they can enjoy cultural life at a nearby coffee shop.
People usually go to art galleries to enjoy paintings, but here I can enjoy them with coffee. I came here to see paintings with some drinks.
This place is divided into the exhibition section and the cafe section. Here our customers can get emotional healing with artworks. The garden is also nice here, so I hope this place to be shared by many people.
The shop also sells the paintings too, and the exhibition plans by different painters are updated. Also, some groups regularly gather at the shop to read books together for a discussion. So now the coffee shop is even functioning as a place to talk and learn.
Well, it really is becoming like a double function then. You can drink coffee but also purchase plants or paintings as well, if you want, if you go to one of these cafes. And I guess the reason they're doing this is because these cafes want to find their own slice of the market and they want to provide different services to their customers.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. So these cafes are changing into more different concepts other than that, like, well, study rooms. So we can say it's already a part of their marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And take a listen to what an expert thinks.
There are already a number of cafes in Korea, so they have to be competitive. More coffee shops are changing into a nice place for a rest and a chat. They want to provide more premium services than other shops.
Experts say this trend will keep growing as there will be more and more demand from customers seeking quality service.
Well, I think it's the case where with all these franchises taking over South Korea in terms of the coffee industry, they have to differentiate themselves from those and bring in the customers by using these different kind of ideas. Jungmin, as always, it was a pleasure, and thank you for bringing in that information today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Good morning. This week is a transition period from our ongoing summer to the coolness of autumn, as the somewhat summer-like conditions will finally give way to an autumn chill from this afternoon. And morning lows will also dip to the low teens from tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, wide temperature differences continue. Some parts of the country could see highs jumping more than 10 degrees Celsius by the afternoon. So take care of your health, as it's the season when a lot of us come down with the sniffles. And taking a closer look at today's daily highs, upper regions will see highs slightly lower than yesterday, but it's going to remain warm for southern areas. So Seoul gets up to 26 degrees, but Daegu and Gyeongju will rise to 29 degrees this afternoon, and most regions will enjoy some beautiful September sunshine. The fine autumn weather will continue under mostly sunny skies through the end of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now in terms of the news and weather on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.